Hello and welcome to episode 82. This is like a Media 101 episode on what to know before introducing yourself to the media.
Welcome to the PR Playbook Podcast, the only podcast giving you actionable skills and advice you need to execute a strategic PR program. Warning: what you hear next may lead to brand awareness and increased sales and customer exposure. Now here's your host, Rinjini Joshua.
Hello and welcome to episode 82. Today we're going to be talking to the president and founder of Trust Relations, April Margulies, and we're going to be talking mostly about what to do before introducing yourself to media, which I think is such a great topic because a lot of you might be doing media for the first time, or you might have tried to do media and it didn't quite work out. So April, thank you so much for joining us on the PR Playbook podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So can you just do like a kind of a brief high level intro of yourself so everybody knows who we're talking to today?
Definitely. No problem. So as she mentioned, I'm the founder of Trust Relations. We are about 3 years old now as an agency. And prior to founding Trust Relations, I've worked for a lot of the big agencies, including Weber Shandwick and Edelman and Rubenstein. And so I had, some great experiences there that I wanted to parlay into doing my own thing and building on some of what I thought they did really well. And, maybe not doing some of the things I wasn't as endeared to. So that's kind of the genesis of that. A lot of the people that we work with call it the anti-agency because we are a strictly virtual agency on purpose. So started that way before the pandemic, which served us very well when that happened. And I think, I like having the access to people from across the country because I think it provides a more diverse thought when it comes to coming with story angles for different clients. And I also think it's a nice way of, not being limited by a geography. So that's one of the reasons we did that. And the other reason is just to cut down on the overhead so that more senior people can work on the accounts more hours and, you get better service, I think, as a result.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So great. And what do you guys, what is your specialty as far as kind of vertical markets or the types of clients that you typically serve?
It's a great question. So we are strangely, for our size and age, industry agnostic. So basically, I do that on purpose, which means we are doing tech and B2B. We are doing lifestyle and consumer. We are doing pets. We're doing real estate. We are all over the place. Part of the reason I like to do that is because I think a lot of brands now have 360-degree needs in terms of their storytelling. So they're needing things in some cases. We have, for example, a pet client right now that needs us to announce a Series A, and they really want business press to get in front of Series B, but they also need holiday gift guide pitching, right? And so I'm able to put together a team that knows how to pitch the VC trades and get those business press that they need for their Series A, but also can do all the gift guides and get them all those, pet product placements they're looking for. So I actually did that on purpose because I think that there are also techniques that sometimes are usually, reserved for the consumer side that can be really effective on the B2B tech side. And likewise, there are things with thought leadership and other pieces of the B2B tech side that are normally the bread and butter of those campaigns that sometimes work really well on the consumer side. So I like to cross-pollinate teams and have them be, have them have a team that can tell all of their stories and not just within whatever niche it looks like they're in.
And it's just more fun, I feel like.
Okay, fair. And let's be honest, it's also a little bit in some ways more anti-fragile because you never know when a certain industry might get hit by, something that happens. Like I know a lot of hospitality agencies had a really difficult time during COVID, right? So if you're only doing a niche like that and something happens that affects an entire industry, it can wipe out the agency. Yeah. So it's also just a way of preserving yourself and, your ability to
future-proofing your client base. That makes sense.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of do the same thing. We're kind of similar in that way. We work across both tech. We're technology mostly. Actually, we're like almost 100% technology, but both B2B, B2C, various types of clients. And so that kind of brings us to a different question, and great to be able to get your angle on this as well, serving different industries. You know, one of the things that we do talk about is DIY PR, learning PR and understanding PR. And that's like kind of the premise of this podcast, is to really educate people on PR so they can make wise choices. And I really wanted to talk to you because I think you guys came with a really interesting concept or angle of really understanding what you need to know. And I don't think I can cover this topic enough before you start doing public relations with an agency, or even if you just are doing it yourself. What are some of the basic things that you should consider before diving in? And what do you think those are? What are your kind of best practices on that?
Yeah. So first, I kind of have the when you might not be PR ready list of things that might be tips for you to know that you're not quite there, and things that you might need to work on before you do PR. So we can start there, even though it's a little bit it's a little bit of a bummer. But
Yeah.
some agencies do branch out into areas where they can help you with these things as well. So just know that just because you don't have them doesn't mean you can't hire a PR firm tomorrow. It just means just know that these are startup costs that are going to have to go into the campaign before everything can take off and be, at 11.
Right.
So one thing is, I think a lot of startups are, and not just startups, but sometimes there are companies that think that they know where they fall in the marketplace,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not totally clear on their differentiators. And I know that could sound shocking to some people, but it can happen, right? You can kind of get into it. You have a great idea. You love it. You're passionate about it. You take off with it. It takes off. But there's never been a moment where because things just
Came
like
together
gangbusters,
somehow.
right?
Yeah.
They came together quickly. Maybe you didn't take the time to step back and think about, okay, who is the target audience and where do we fit in the marketplace? So how do we differentiate ourselves from anything else that's out there? Now, maybe you're doing something that's completely new. It's never been done before, and that's fair. That said, you still are going to be viewed by the media as falling within some competitive landscape, even if you're a unicorn, right? So it's important to know, even if you are that one company that nobody else is doing anything like it, there's still there's a solution that somebody is currently using to address it, or there's something that could be akin to a competitive landscape. And I just think it's important to know, where do you fit into that? Because that's what the media is going to want to know, right? So it's the kind of thing your agency.
That's the best thing, when someone comes and tells you, "Oh, well, I don't have any competitors," and you're like, "Oh, well, then it's easy. This is easy then."
No, and it can't. I mean, sometimes it's true. Sometimes it's not true, right? And they don't know that it's not true until you start digging into it. So I think it's important to realize that the media is skeptical. Journalists are skeptical by nature, and they're going to vet things very differently than you do. So they aren't going to take the sales pitch that you're giving to other people at face value, and they aren't just going to use your enthusiasm as a proof point. So they're going to want to know, what is it that makes you different? What are you actually doing that's different? And where do you have examples of that? So I think that's one thing to just really have dialed. As simple as that sounds, but it's one of those things that can be overlooked when you just,
you're drinking your juice.
Take me away, and suddenly like everything is in full bloom, and
totally,
there's not a moment to think about it. So it's something to think about before you start doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And also just think about, along those lines, what is a story that you have to tell? So what is the founder story? What's the inspiration? What was the igniting purpose or mission of the company that led you to where you are today? Because that's what people ultimately want to know. They want to connect emotionally to what happened. Were you at a dinner party? Were you talking to your nephew? Did it happen on accident because suddenly your hobby? I just talked to a guy today who, his hobby suddenly became a business because it was in such demand.
Yeah.
And now he's got this, blossoming business, and he needs PR for the first time, right? And these things can happen where suddenly, but that's a great story.
Yeah.
Where he was just, a high paid, six-figure executive, and suddenly his hobby is now paying more than that somehow, and he didn't intend for it to, but it's all coming together. So Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's just good to know what is that, what is the thing that's really going to capture everyone's imagination? And
Mhm.
then how do you package that in a way that you can tell it convincingly?
Yeah,
So,
I think that that's really important. You were mentioning the story. That's definitely really important. I also think, kind of like just piggybacking off of what you said, is important to kind of vet that with someone else that's not you.
yes,
Because,
yes,
like sometimes you might think that your story is unique and so special. And then you tell someone and they're like, well, I just read that in like TechCrunch like last week. It
right,
already
yeah, yeah,
happened.
yeah. So this other company just started in a garage and had 2 employees too. So
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So
I mean, that is
yeah,
it's a
while I
very good
think that's,
point.
yeah, that's really important, but I also think like vet the story with other people because working with startups, like you have to keep moving in the industry, you have to be passionate, you have to believe you're the only one, you have to have that conviction that you guys are doing the best thing, but then when you're talking to the media, you also have to be realistic. And I really like what you were mentioning about the competitive landscape. You have to understand the competitive landscape so that you can position yourself against somebody else, even if you don't think they're really a competitor. Like just to, just to like would play devil's advocate and just pretend like you have these competitors.
Right. Yeah, because the media is going to want to know, so who else is doing this? And if you say no one, they're still not going to believe you. So you
Yeah.
can say, well, this company is doing this, which is different from us in this way.
Uh-huh.
Obviously that we also want to mention here, you don't want to give your competitors ink. So you're not
Right.
necessarily going to want to come out of the gate giving away the names of the competitors for God forbid they end up in the article
Right.
alongside you, which is not what you're going for. But that said, I think it's still just important to say, some people are doing this, which is very
Right.
different from what we're doing. And we're doing this, which is what is not being done by anybody else.
Yes.
And so I
Yeah.
think it's just good to give them, help them put a pin on the map so
Yeah.
that they understand where you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Even if you're
You have to
between
have
two
like
continents.
you have to have an audience, the sector. Like where do you live in this world
Yeah,
of like all this marketplace stuff? That's totally true.
exactly.
That's totally true. I mean, that's two really important, I think, things, but I'm sure you have some more. So we're going to keep
I
going
do.
down this road. Let's keep going down this road.
So, yeah. So, I mean, another thing I think that's really important, and I don't mean to sound like this is so basic that, why would anybody not have this in place? But sometimes a marketing plan is not exactly in place. And so
Yeah.
there isn't necessarily, you haven't yet identified who is it that you're going after, who's your target audience. Ideally you even have the identities of them, right? The way that a lot of brands build up and they say, we're going after Kimmy. She lives in the Midwest and she
Right.
shops here and she's 25 to, 48 or whatever, right? So it's good to have, you don't have to be that granular, but you need to be able to give your PR practitioner or team an idea of what you're shooting for, because otherwise they're sort of inventing your marketing plan while doing PR, which is sort of like trying to run and, I don't know, play the bongos at the same time. I mean,
Yeah,
it just doesn't.
I mean, let's talk about that a little bit because I think that's where some companies that maybe are, let's just call them like just young companies that are a little bit green or starting out, they don't realize how important it is to kind of differentiate your PR plan from your marketing plan and like how they work together and how they work separately, right? Like it's
Right.
not just I don't ever like to say that PR and marketing are like 100% different, but like when I first started working in PR, like you did not want to be called the marketing person, And so that was like a big deal. It was like, no, I'm not a marketing person. I'm a PR person. It's very different. However,
Right.
we are like sisters. Like you do play together with that very closely with messaging and things like that. There's just a sales component of marketing that's a little bit different, and you've got the credibility component of PR, which is a little bit different. So like what would you suggest like in a small company when they're just starting to develop their plans? would you recommend that they come up with their kind of base PR plan before they jump into doing PR? Because I know PR is like just, it's like that added layer of credibility, but you really have to have a direction first. I feel like marketing gives you that direction. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree with that. Yeah, I don't think you have to have figured out what media outlets your PR team should pitch you for, or what tactics your PR team should do. I don't think you need to know all of that, but I do think you need to know, we're trying to get in front of these kinds of consumers that we've had trouble getting in front of, or we only want, our main thrust is millennials, right? Because the problem is, if you know that in your head, but you haven't put it on paper, and then you hire a PR firm, and then they come back with some, bustle, and you say, well, that doesn't reach our target audience. We never told them who your target audience was, right? So then you end up with a disconnect, and then the team can get frustrated, and then the effort can be wasted. So I think it's just important to have in your mind, or the example I gave earlier with this pet company, right? They know they are looking for more investors. That's mission number one. Mission number two is consumer press. But if they haven't told us that, and then we went and got a bunch of consumer press, and they don't really want listicles or gift guides, then suddenly they're frustrated because so I just think it's important to know, what are you trying, in addition to just, we want more people to know about us, what is it that will do for your company? So, because obviously the brand building, the credibility building is the thrust of PR, but to what end will that work? So is it going to get you more investors? Is it going to get you more consumers? Is it going to get you more consumers within a certain segment? Is it going to, get you attention through in front of other brands that might be synergistic that you can partner with? Is it, what are some of the things that on the business side you need that credibility to drive?
And I think that's really important. I like that you're saying this, because I think it's really important for these companies to understand that, PR is not as far from your business goals as you think it is. It can be very, very aligned, and PR is so many different tactics. And you're right. They don't have to know the tactics. That's our job, right? Like, that's our job to know and advise them and recommend those things. But all they need to know is, what are your business goals? What are your main business goals? And I think it comes down to that too. It's like, sometimes you don't want the client to tell you what PR things they want, because they actually, not to be overstepping, but like, you don't know what PR things you want because you're not a PR person.
Right.
Lead us by telling us what business goals that you want to achieve, and we can tell you which PR things can like map to those back. And I think that's a huge thing, like, that we've actually had to communicate with a lot of people, is like, if you know PR, if you understand PR, if you've done it before, you might know, hey, these are the things that we want to do. But it's actually much better to get insight from a PR team. And actually you should be able to, kind of one of those things where you can gauge a PR team with like how intelligent or smart or how well they get you, of saying like, hey, these are the business goals we're trying to achieve. What PR tactics would you use to get to that point?
Right. Yeah. And I've had a couple conversations recently, which is just sort of, I want to use these examples of what not to do if you're a brand looking for PR help. So I've had a couple people come to me and they say, well, you've seen our presence online. What do you think you can do for us? And it's like, well, we need to know, what is it that you want help with, right? So right. I can't, I don't have, a magic 8-ball that I can just look at where you've been online and what is on your website.
Know. Yeah.
Who's in the competitive landscape, and somehow I know what your end goal is, right? I can't know that without you telling me. So I think that's the point is, yes, they can tell you what they can do for you, but you first need to let them know, what is it that you most need help with?
Yes.
Or what is it that, or even if it's that, here, current firm is not getting us the coverage we need because we want more sustainability coverage, and they're only getting some listicles or whatever it is, right? Just make sure that you communicate what's missing, and then they know where to fill in behind it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is like, not to think, a lot of people think PR is magic, right? Like, you just like appear, and you like pay someone to do PR. And all of a sudden you're going to get all this PR exactly that fits your needs. No, there's a lot of
Right. It's a genie in a
collaboration that
bottle.
goes, yeah, there's a lot of collaboration that goes in there. So you really have to
Yeah.
understand what you want to get out of it, but from a business sense, right? Like you don't, I love it when people say, well, I need to put a press release out every week. And I'm like, I had a client say this a long time ago. And I'm like, why do you need to have a press release out every week? What are you going to be announcing every week? Like, do you actually
Right.
have that much news? And then, they were way in over their heads. We couldn't keep up with one a week, or I could keep up, but like they couldn't keep up with one a week because they didn't actually have that much news to tell. And then also, what about media fatigue? If you're announcing bogus stuff every week, no one's going to want to talk to you.
No.
Yeah.
No, that's right. You're gonna sour a lot of relationships and burn a lot of bridges.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. The dynamics of really understanding what you want to get out of it is very important. I love that. And I love this conversation because I think it's something people should really listen and understand about, like getting into a PR engagement. Now, one of the things that you were kind of talking to me about were, how to choose the right agency. And there's so many out there. That's, I know we weren't going to necessarily touch on that topic, but because we're kind of there, we're kind of on the cusp. so, like, when you're approaching, you're kind of have your marketing plan and you kind of have some ideas of what you want to get out of it. What do you think are kind of the main things that people should be kind of considering or gelling with their PR agency when they want to select one?
Yeah. So the first thing I tell people, and this is going to sound a little bit hokey, but it's kind of your gut. So if you have a deep connection with somebody and it feels legit, it probably is legit. And if you have that deep connection with somebody that feels legit, that means that they're going to be totally emotionally invested in you and your success. So I know that it's a little bit of a sort of, touchy-feely one, but I do think it's important that if you vibe with somebody and, then you talk to a bigger agency that seems more impressive, but you don't connect with them.
Right.
I don't think the good move is to go with the bigger agency, because I think, not that bigger agencies aren't better in certain cases, they can be, but I just think if you have that connection with somebody, that's really important. I think case studies are important to look at. I think if you see, that somebody's done a good job in a similar space, I think that's, that always shows you that they can deliver. And I think, the other thing to keep in mind is that, as weird as this sounds, agencies that only pitch marquee brands have it really easy. Those are the ones that are easy to get coverage for. So if you look at, if you go to Weber Shandwick and you interview with them and you see that all of their, client list is a who's who and all
like
of the media coverage
the
reflects
Fortune
that.
500 brands, you're like, yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. Now, on the other hand, if you see a company that's representing a bunch of startups that you've never heard of, and all of the placements are in Forbes, Business Week, Reuters, like Vogue. I mean, I started with business, but we can go in the other real simple, right? Go in the other direction. Like, if you see that they are delivering top tier hits for no names, then you might want to prioritize them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because it is way harder to get press for somebody with no brand recognition than Pillsbury, like some really big brand.
Well, because you've got, I think some people don't even understand, like some brands like Pillsbury or Coca-Cola, or let's say Amazon, or any one of those brands, right? There's reporters sometimes just dedicated to their news. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is like, well, why can't you just get me into Business Week or Wall Street Journal or whatever the case may be? Well, it's because those actual brands are so big that they actually have a reporter watching them constantly. So that's why they're always there.
Their beat is covering,
Yeah.
Their beat is covering Chipotle. That's what they do.
That's a reality. Well, sometimes, some brands get so big that, they're there for constant coverage. And that's a really good point, because I think so many startups in particular, I guess, they don't realize like the dynamics of the media, and it's so challenging to really give them what they want when you've never had a name before, which is why credibility is so important, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I want to kind of, I always like to, we've talked actually a lot about tips. Actually, the most of this is tips. So I hope everyone's like grabbing onto these tips. But do you have any like particular kind of, I guess, I don't want to say best practices because we've been talking about that, but like your golden nuggets of like how you tell people to kind of get started and what they should do. Like, really, if they're considering PR today, what is like the next 3 steps for them as they dive into it?
Yeah. And do we want to get into if they're doing it themselves or if they're hiring someone?
Well, I think both. Yeah,
Okay.
both. Yeah.
Okay. So I do have some tips for if you're thinking about, how, okay, we did an announcement, it's over. Now I don't know what to do to get press, and you're doing it yourself. There are some things that you can look at. So one is, making sure you report any major milestones that you reach as a company or anything along those lines. So did you, for example, reach a certain sales number? Did you have a new office open? Did you have obviously if you have a new product launch, you probably know to do that. But is there a momentum story that you can tell to prove that your company is blossoming and moving along and having a great success that in a way that you can substantiate through some proof points? That's one great thing to look at. So just make sure that you're not just limiting it to the very obvious things. Maybe it's even an executive hire and you want to announce that person. So just be thinking along the lines of what are some of the business milestones that are upcoming or that we just met that we could announce to show our growth. That's one thing. I always think that it's important, and I think most people know this, but offering free demos if you're on the tech side or offering free samples if you're on the consumer side can go a long way. But make sure you don't just send them willy-nilly without having first gotten permission to do so, right? So I've talked to a lot of brands and they think they haven't done PR and they're like, we just start sending 500 product samples to all of the press. No. You can't just send them stuff without them agreeing to accept it, especially now because you need to consider they're working from home, most of them still, and their apartments, if they're in New York City, are small and they're full of stuff. So they are like turning away products that normally they would accept because they cannot fit it in their house or their apartment because everyone is sending them stuff at their house, right? So, or at their apartment or whatever it is. So it's just important to keep in mind that you can't just send it and think that's going to get you where you want it to go. But that said, make sure you set aside budget to send out product samples and set aside time and or codes or whatever, download codes or whatever it is to provide access to what you're providing, the solution you're providing, the platform, the app, whatever it is. So that's one thing. Another thing I think sometimes people overlook is case studies. So figuring out, especially on the B2B tech side, where a client has successfully used your solution is a much more interesting story to most media than the fact your solution exists. So just because your solution is awesome, which I'm sure it is, you still need to prove how it helped somebody, how it helped a company, how it helped, a client, whatever it is, to say, they used our solution to solve this problem and it helped them in this way. And here's the numbers or the statistics or the percentage, the dollar amount, whatever it is that
the
helps.
500% growth that they experienced.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it is, and I think that that's the kind of thing you want to make sure that you're promoting because the media cares about that, especially on the trade side. On the consumer side, that's harder to do because you're probably not going to get a consumer that's going to want to talk about how they used your product successfully. So that's a little more tricky. But I mean, if you have strategic partners that you can announce or leverage, that's another thing to consider. And, maybe in some cases you've got customer growth in a certain space that you you can use those statistics to say, but consumers are now they're partial to this product or this flavor or this scent or this whatever it is. We're seeing that 80% of our consumers now only want vanilla lime, or whatever it is. And I think, I don't know why it's vanilla lime, but
because it's fabulous.
Now I want vanilla lime.
Vanilla lime is fabulous. I really like that scent.
So, if that's the kind of thing that's happening, then I think that's also a great story to pitch. Not necessarily for listicles and some of the consumer pubs, but there's going to be somebody that's interested in that story. So I think that those are the kinds of things just to keep in the back of your mind. Make sure that you're looking at all the angles and sort of treating your business, if you're in-house, like you're the in-house dedicated reporter. Like she's saying, right, there's the dedicated Chipotle reporter. Well, if you're doing in-house PR or you're trying to do in-house PR because you're, doing it under the marketing function or whatever the case is, that's important to do, is just start to think like a reporter. And if you're not sure whether it's a story, go on TechCrunch if that's where you want to be and see if anybody's written a similar story. Or watch Good Morning America every morning for 2 weeks and make sure that you see that that's actually something that they've covered or would cover.
Okay, so now we're kind of ready to go. We've had this DIY thing, but now we're overwhelmed because all of a sudden you realize PR is a lot harder than it sounds. What are your tips of, like, we talked about going with the gut, but other things that we need to look at when you're choosing selecting an agency that you really want to kind of move forward with?
Yes. So the other thing I will say is I also kind of have some tips for when you need to hire somebody.
Oh, that's great. Now let's start there.
When are you looking at all of the warning signs or the red flags that this is your moment where you need to hire somebody? So one is that you now have more money than time.
Right.
And if your time is stretched way too thin, but you have capital now, this is your moment to explore where you can get some help, right? So if you have enough capital to make a sustained investment, that's the other thing I will throw out there. I think too often people get kind of a false start because they only have 3 months of PR budget and they want to start trying PR. But if the 3 months doesn't get them enough revenue in kind to continue the engagement, then they give up on it.
Totally.
And so that's the other thing is, make sure that you're ready to you're in it for the long haul, right? You can't afford the sustained cost, even if it's a low budget, right? Even if you're coming in at $5,000 a month, and just make sure you can sustain that for 6 months comfortably without taking out loans or biting your fingernails off or, pulling out your hair. Just make sure that, because at PR, it does take a while to build, as I'm sure most people on here know, and I know because you've talked about it. But it's it's a long build. So just make sure you're in it for the long haul, and that that's something you really have to have in place. Then the other thing is, if you've tried to the point you made before and failed, that you're ready for help, right? You put together a list, you pitched everybody on it, you got no responses, maybe one response, you got one kind of sad article, you put out a press release, nobody picked it up, right? If these are the kinds of experiences you've had and you have a capital and you have more money than time, this is your moment to get some help, right? So this is because it is a lot harder art form than people think. I think it seems easy. They think they can do it. They jump in and try, and then they realize that it's not going the way they thought it would.
Well, and I usually tell people, yes, PR, it's very DIY. You can definitely do it yourself. That's not the problem. But the problem is the amount of experience we've built up in doing it every day for the last however many years you've been doing it.
Right.
So it's just, we've had so much experience in trial and error of telling the story in different ways that maybe you might not have. So yes, you could do it. You could get lucky. Some people do get lucky, but that's not the case for everyone. And it's, something that you really have to put a lot of effort towards if you're going to do it right.
Exactly. Yeah. So another sign that you're ready for help is that your company is going through a pivotal moment. And if you don't capitalize on it in the press, you're going to miss a huge opportunity. And if you aren't sure that you know how to do that and make that thing soar, this is probably the moment where you really need to bite the bullet and get some help, because you just don't want to miss that opportunity, right? I've had some clients that have come to us after having tried to launch their own thing. And then they say, hey, we tried and we only got this one hit. Can you help? And yes,
you're like, the press release is already out.
But the news is out. So they already shot themselves in the foot. They only got one kind of sad piece. And, you can't, it's like the genie's out of the bottle, right? Or the what are the other metaphors? It's like,
no, that's,
you can't, it's
the cat's out of the bag. The cat's out of
the bag. That's what I was trying to use. I used genie twice already, so I got genie on the brain. No, so it's like you need to know that you can deliver, or you need to get some help, because you aren't going to have a chance to announce the thing again. It's like making a first impression. You never have a second chance to make a first impression. You never have a second chance to introduce whatever the news is
for the first time. It has to be the first time. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I feel like a lot of people think that's not a real thing, because I've had that happen to us. Like, people come to us and like, oh, we announced this already, but we'd like to get some more legs. And I'm like, well, you've announced it. Like, I think this goes back to what you were saying about put yourself in the reporter's shoes. The reporter they have a job to do. Their job is not to write about your company. Their job is to get eyeballs on their website. And the only thing that can do that is news, like real news. So if you think about the job that the journalist has to do, and then maybe think about PR and that kind of concept, maybe it'll make you understand that, like, okay, yeah, you only have this one shot. And also maybe it'll help you frame the story differently. Like, think about the job that the journalist has. Launching your website is not their primary concern. So how many times have you been hit with that? We're launching a new website. Okay.
Right. Yeah. We can't, that's not news.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Unless it's part of a rebranding,
right?
And there's something newsworthy about the rebranding, then yes. But if you just fancified your website,
it's new. People should know about it. Yes, people should know about it. That's called advertising. That's called,
or maybe social media, or digital marketing.
Exactly.
Or what newsletters are for.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Too funny. So, and then if you are engaging a PR firm, I also have some tips for like things that you should be prepared to ask and answer. I don't know if we want to get into that.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm
overloading everyone here.
This is great.
Okay. So things that you should be prepared to ask, and you might want to do this one before you hire the firm. So who is my team? Because you want to make sure that you're not getting a bait and switch where some fancy, older, 30 years steeped storied person is coming in, pitching the business, and then you never see them again.
That's that big agency experience talking. I know that from experience myself, that we've all experienced that. We've all done it. If you worked at a big agency, you've been a part of that whole plot.
Yes.
But yeah, it's such I feel like that doesn't happen as much anymore than it used to. Because people caught on, because I've had people say like, well, you're not gonna, are you gonna be on the team, or who's gonna be on the team? Are you gonna switch the team members? Like, I've had people come to me with that question specifically.
I have to.
Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of like an old game they used to play. Bring in the heavy hitters for the pitch, and then switch them out for the junior people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would be prepared to ask them that. I would be prepared to ask them how they're going to measure success, and also make sure that you give them what success looks like to you, right? So that's sort of a two-part thing, but you need to let them know, do you care about impressions or not? Do you only care about getting the one big feature per quarter that, is going to move the needle for you business-wise? So just make sure that that's figured out pretty quickly at the beginning. Even in the kickoff call, it doesn't need to be figured out before you hire the firm, but it's the kind of thing you just want to get aligned on early on.
Some kind of benchmark. Yeah.
What are the benchmarks? What does success look like here? Because that also is just going to make sure everyone's expectations are aligned, so that you don't end up having a conflict later.
Yeah.
So That's an important one, I think. And then I think you should also ask, what do you need from me? So that is always music to our ears as
Yes.
publicists, because so often we are, dragging people behind us, kicking and screaming, trying to get information out of them. So if you come out and you express off the bat, what do you need from me? What to be successful? What are the assets? I think that's going to go a long way in setting the relationship up for success.
I think that's such a great point because like I was talking about before, like it really is a collaboration. Like we cannot tell your story without your input, your help, your vibe. Like we're telling your story, we're not telling our story. So I think that's a really important element of it, is understanding where you as a company fit into the PR mix and how you should be participating. My brother has a technology company, and I worked with him for a little while. And early on, he was like, I think he was really surprised to see, like, well, why do I have to do so much? Like, what, why are you asking me all these questions? Shouldn't you be figuring this out? And I'm like, yeah, we're an expert at PR. We're not an expert at your business. And so
Right.
you need to get that input before I can run with it in a couple months once I've learned everything that you guys do. But today, as a kickoff, like, you need to give me that input so that I can, register that and soak it in. It's like hiring a new employee. You have to train them. So there is a level, I think, a good PR agency will need a level of knowledge and training, and then you can let them do what they do,
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too. I think that's another way to know if you're not quite PR ready, is if you don't have the bandwidth and time to manage the team. Because keep in mind, you're hiring this team, but you're basically hiring a group of people. So if you were hiring somebody internally, you wouldn't hire a group of people internally and then leave them to die by themselves in the corner. You wouldn't, you have to manage them, right? You have to give them tasks to do. You have to give them, set expectations. You have to check in. You have to, make sure that you're communicating with them and provide
them a little bit.
Yeah. So just make sure that you're there, because you might not be, right? I mean, a lot of times entrepreneurs are spread so thin, and they just want to hire a firm to help, but they can't do any interviews. They can't answer any questions. They can't get on the biweekly calls or whatever the cadence is with the agency. And if you can't do that, you're not setting them up for success, and the investment is not going to be maximized. So you can end up being angry at the agency, or maybe it'll work. But in most cases, that's a big gamble if you're going to invest that kind of money in PR and not have the time to back it. You have money and time to invest.
I'm sure, being in the agency environment, I'm sure you've struggled with that before, and we've struggled with that before. And we're solutions focused. So like, we try to find a solution. I'll try to enable the client as much as possible. But when you're pulling teeth so hard, it's also really hard to inspire. Like you said, you're hiring a team. You have to inspire them to want to work for you. And when you can't get them on a phone call, you can't get them to fill out a paper or review some work. It's so difficult. And we've gone to some extreme lengths at times to get people to give us input. It's just like,
actually, we have a funny thing that we sometimes do, which is either you do media training and you use it as an opportunity to grill them on the things that you haven't gotten answers for. So that's one way to drag information out of them. And also, if you have a friendly journalist and you can get them to agree to do the interview as sort of a favor and not have them commit to coverage,
right?
That can be another way. Because sometimes what I discover is these clients who don't want to give you the information, first time you get a media interview, all of a sudden you find out all of this stuff that you had what? You do that? I had no idea. You never told me that. There's like this hilarious thing
that is such a great tactic. I love it. I love that.
So, because, obviously getting them interviews is the easier way to do it. But if you don't even have enough information yet to do that, then you can do, either a media training where somebody grills them like they're a reporter. So you do a mock interview, or you can get a friendly to, jump in and help you out.
Let's tell these people though, don't do that. Don't make us do that.
Please don't make us do that. Please don't make us trick you.
Yeah, collaboration is really important.
It is so important.
Be upfront with your information, and I like that you said, make sure you have a little time carved out. And I have had more people ask me that question lately. I would say over the last, I've been doing this for a long time, so it's only been like the last couple of years. People are like, well, what do you expect from us? And that's the best question you can get. That is the best question you can get. I love it. I love that question.
Definitely. Yeah. And then the only other advice I have is if you're starting with a firm, you should also be ready to answer a few questions. Yes. So this is, again, it's not quite the same as are you ready for PR, but it is, are you ready for the kickoff call with the PR team to set them up for success so that they don't have to drag you kicking and screaming through the mud to get information out of you? So for example, be prepared to answer or offer this up, right? What are your business goals, to the point we made before? What does your ideal headline look like? What are your dream publications, right? What are you hoping to be in? What are you hoping that's going to look like? Who in the space do you think is telling their story well? Yeah. Are you really impressed by a competitor? Is there a thought leader in the space that you just, gosh, I admire that person, and if I could be like them, right? Yeah. Let them know, because they want to know that that's what you're aiming for. Also know or be prepared to answer, who are your main spokespeople? You'd be surprised how many times a company isn't really sure who's going to be doing the media interviews. Yeah. And that's something you want to have ironed out in advance. And ideally, what I even like to do is have, after we finish our key messaging with them, then have a thought leader map that maps back to that. So you have, here's all the executives that are going to be talking. Here are the key points that they're uniquely qualified to discuss. And here's how it maps back to the key messaging that we developed. Yeah. So you have a very clear delineation between which executive is most uniquely qualified and capable and excited about the four main key messages that you're trying to get through, or whatever it is, maybe each one has three. So, and then the last thing that is very important is, what are your proof points? So what do you have that substantiates the claims that you want in the stories? Do you have statistics? Do you have data? Do you have case studies? What is it that you can provide that's going to show the media, again, very skeptical, we're great at this, and here's your evidence. Right. Because they aren't going to just I think it's just important, especially as marketers are used to doing a lot of fluffier, sexier copy, and that only goes so far with the press. So they want to know, okay, you say that about yourself, where's the evidence? Yeah. So just think more like you're making your case before a lawyer or a judge or or a jury, because that's more what it's like than a sales pitch. Yeah, absolutely. No, these are fantastic. I feel like there's so many tips in this podcast that we're gonna have to. We'll transcribe it, so you guys can take a look at the transcription if you want to go through and kind of walk through the tips of how to know when you're ready, how to select a PR agency, what to prepare beforehand. I think those are like kind of the three main topics that we covered here. April, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a nice, absolutely, nice talking to a fellow PR person. I know. No, it's so fun to be on the same page and sort of, be able to bounce off of each other, all of these things that we've both experienced, and then be able to laugh about it. Yeah. No, it's, I love PR. I've been doing this for a long time. So I love doing it. I love talking to people about it and just making sure people are informed about what they should know, because I think it makes our job easier, regardless of if we're in the same field or not. Your agency probably does something very similar to our agency, but you're right. Every agency has their own personality. You kind of want to see who you fit with. There's room. It's like that saying, there's room for everyone. It's like we all have our own special dynamic. And I think it's just important to see who you fit with, and but to be educated about what you're doing when you're going into it. Definitely. So where can people find you if they want to chat with you further? What is your website? So the website is startups.Agency. And you can even find on there, if you go to Hire Us Now, you can find my Calendly link. So if you want to schedule a meeting with me, you don't even need to email me. You can just go straight to my calendar and put yourself on there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. And then we'll have the links in the show notes. And then I think we'll maybe try to glean out some of the points that we talked about so people can just kind of go right to the points as well. But this is definitely worth a good listen. So thank you so much for your time today. And I appreciate having you. And hopefully we can talk again about another fun topic. Actually, this might be a good time for me to talk about the PR Essentials Summit. We are going to be doing our second PR Essentials Summit. We kind of started this in COVID just to give people more information about PR and get them to understand the groundwork before the new year begins. And April, I'd love to have you on as one of our guest panelists on that summit in December.
I would love that. I'm so honored. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So everybody here has heard it. She has confirmed. You can't go back.
I'm locked in. Public
yes, locked in. Awesome. So, you guys watch out for the PR Summit. I think the dates will be announced in later in September. And April will be. She's our first confirmed guest here, so this will be awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much,
honored.
and I hope everyone has a great day. Be well.